Welcome to the podcast Leadership Forum, conversation with leaders who serve the public good. My name is Trevor Brown, and I'm privileged to serve as Dean of the John Glenn College of Public Affairs at The Ohio State University, where we aspire to fulfill a simple phrase that Senator John Glenn used to describe what we do: inspire citizenship and develop leadership. I also have the honor of serving as the host of this conversation series. So welcome to a thoughtful and reflective conversation about leadership and public service. I'm joined today by Aftab Pureval, Mayor of Cincinnati, a graduate of The Ohio State University and the University of Cincinnati College of Law. The mayor started his career in private legal practice in Washington, D.C. before returning to Ohio to work as a U.S. attorney and then joined Cincinnati's Procter & Gamble as inside legal counsel. In 2015-2016, he successfully ran for his second elected office. His first was as undergraduate student president at Ohio State, and he became the elected clerk of courts for Hamilton County. After a run for a congressional seat in 2018, in 2021, he successfully ran to serve as the 70th mayor of Cincinnati. Mayor, welcome to our podcast, and thank you for joining me for a conversation about leadership in the public sector.
Dean, I'm so honored to be here. It's always a pleasure to be virtually, at least, back on campus. I really had a wonderful 4 years at Ohio State, and so glad to be still connected to the university. So thanks for having me on.
Well, go Bucks.
That's right.
So let's just start by talking about your pathway to elected leadership. Your first run, at least as far as I know, was your run here at the university for undergraduate student government. But fundamentally, your big office, your first one, was the Hamilton County Clerk of Courts. Why this office? Why'd you run?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, my story, not to take you too far back, but I'll be brief. My story really starts with my parents. I'm the son of a refugee. My mom was born in Tibet and forced to flee. She made her way to India, where she grew up as a refugee, and met my father, who's from Punjab, India. And they got married and they decided to come to the United States. So, Dean, from sea to shining sea, New York to California, they could have gone anywhere. And they chose Beaver Creek, Ohio in 1980. So they came here. I was born a couple of years later, went to public school, Ohio State, UC. I have always been passionate about public service, always been interested in politics. I was a political science major, which might as well be pre-unemployed, but those were the classes that I would get up for in the morning. So I was a political science major. As you mentioned, I was student body president at Ohio State, but I always viewed it as a hobby, like an interest that I was both intellectually and emotionally passionate about. But I always knew that I was going to go to law school and have a career as a lawyer. I never imagined that I, particularly with my background and my name, could find an electorate to elect me and have a career in public service. And it was really President Obama who put me on this path. Mm-hmm. I was kind of swept up in what he embodied, the inspiration of his message, and how he really tried to empower people to believe in not just the country's potential, but in their own individual potential. He's without question our first Black president, but I really view him as our first president with an ethnic name. Yeah. And so he really convinced me that if I worked hard enough and was committed to it, I could have a career in public service. So in 2015, I would tell people I want to run for the Hamilton County Clerk of Courts. And Dean, Democrats would tell me, "Are you crazy? What is wrong with you? You're going to run for an office no one has ever heard of in conservative Hamilton County against a two-term Republican who can't be beaten. By the way, you're a brown dude named Aftab. That is not a strong ballot name in Southwest Ohio. And to do all that, you have to leave your job at P&G. What is wrong with you?" And that was just my mom. So she had some serious concerns. She's still hoping I make it to med school. But I ran anyway. And I chose that office specifically because as a former federal prosecutor, as a litigator, pretty much my entire life, the courts are special to me. And they're designed to be a place where it doesn't matter what you look like, where you're from, or how much money you have. It's designed to be a place where the playing field is equal. Mm-hmm. But we all know that that's crap. In our current system, it matters a great deal what you look like and how much money you have. Oftentimes, in some instances, it dictates the kind of justice that you get. And look, I know when we think about reforming our justice system, we really focus on the criminal side, and for good reason. We focus on prosecutors and the police, but we don't focus enough on the civil side, on just access to justice. If you get a scary legal document in the mail saying that you're being sued or being cited, oftentimes for a vast majority of people, they are not legally sophisticated. They can't afford an attorney. They don't know of an attorney who can help them, and so they're really kind of on their own. And so I chose the clerk of court's office because the clerk's office is the main interface between the community and the court system. And when that main interface is antiquated, inefficient, it undermines the kind of justice that you can get for the rest of your case. So I put a lot of thought into how can I marry my interests for law and politics into an office, and that's how I landed on that.
Tell us, you said it's the main interface between, the citizenry and the court system. What is the clerk of courts, and what does the office do?
Well, if you're listening, get buckled in. Hopefully you're nodding off to sleep, because this will put you entirely to sleep. But
I'm jacked up. I'm excited.
The main job of the clerk is really the record keeper for the county. Back in the day, a lot of folks were illiterate, and the clerk was one of the reason why it's an elected position, frankly, is because it was a really powerful position. It was the one person in charge of all the records in the county, yep, including the courts. And so maintaining those records, making sure that they're accessible and that they're true and consistent and protected is the main job of the clerk. And for your listeners, if you're thinking, who cares about the clerk? This is a meaningless office. Just know this. Before William Henry Harrison could be sworn in as our president, could take the oath of office as the president, Dean, I swear to God, he had to step down as the Hamilton County Clerk of Court. So this is really, I'm going to start a lot of rumors here, but this is really a launching pad to the Oval Office. This is the job in town.
Well, let's talk about that. It is a starting point in some sense for one on a political career. So talk a little bit about that. You chose to go to an office, as you've just rightly said, that people know very little about. So I imagine that created a space for you to develop some skills, some practice, what it means to be an elected official, and maybe one day move on to something bigger, which has already happened. You've moved on to the role of mayor. So just talk a little bit about that progression in your mind, at least what you were thinking about in running for this particular office.
Yeah, I'm self-deprecating about it, but you're really proud of my time there and learned a lot. I mean, it's a massive operation. It's 200 employees with offices all around the county, and it has to work. If it does not work, worst case scenario, someone doesn't have access to issue bond or bail, they sit in jail unjustly because of human error on our part. So it has to work, and it has to work every single time. And when the pandemic hit, there's nothing more essential than our courts. And so my employees didn't take any time off. It's not possible to work from home. They reported to work every single day. And so it is a big management challenge. It's also just a big leadership challenge, because oftentimes we're talking about folks who are underpaid and overworked, and keeping them engaged and inspired, valuing their work, making them feel valued was really difficult. The other aspect of my job is clerk of courts is definitely independently elected, but in many ways I work for the judges. Mm-hmm. And when I got elected, it was a massive upset. I mean, I'm the first Democrat in 100 years to be elected to the clerk of courts, which is a nice applause line in front of a Democratic club. But in reality, what that means is nobody wanted to work with me when I walked into that building, because it was a building full of Republican judges. Yeah. So I really had to learn how to work my skills of persuasion, of bridge building, of collaboration, because unless I made relationships with Republican judges, I wouldn't have gotten anything done, because so much of the work of the clerk of courts is reliant on that. But I'm really glad I started there because it gave me an opportunity to innovate and fail, right? There's such a disincentive because of the scrutiny on government officials to try something new, to be risk tolerant, to innovate. And part of innovation is failure. You have to fail in order to understand how to improve it. And so because I didn't start by running for Congress or running for, mayor, but I started in a smaller, less scrutinized office, I was able to hone those skills, which really prepared me for a much bigger office and much more responsibility as mayor.
I want to come back to the skills that you learned and how you're applying them as mayor, but I want to actually go back to what you said about bridge building and building your collaboration with some folks who were perhaps a little skeptical of you in this role. How'd you do that? What you said you had to use your skills. Well, what were they, and what was your approach, and what lessons can we all learn from how you did that successfully?
Well, look, it's fascinating. I rely a lot on the skills that I developed when at Ohio State as student body president at USG. I mean, people aren't necessarily that complicated. We all have things that inspire us, that motivate us. We all have our goals. And my approach as clerk was to really say this: look, judges, I can't do anything without partnership with you. Mm-hmm. We all know we've got to modernize this building. We all know that we've got to make sure that the playing field is equal. Those are shared values that we have. Let's put all the rest of it aside, including credit, including ego. Let's just work on this. And I'm going to have your back during this process. I'm going to be a genuine partner. And when we succeed, I'm going to put you right up front. The perfect example of this is the help center. So the clerk's office was able to launch, through buy-in from the municipal court, a physical office where anyone can come in and get free legal help immediately. This didn't exist anywhere in the country, but we started it in the clerk of court's office. Our help center isn't called the Hamilton County Clerk of Courts Help Center. It's not called the Aftab Pureval Help Center. It's called the Municipal Court Help Center. So we didn't even put our name on it. And that was intentional, because it's not the Clerk of Courts Help Center. It really is the courthouse's help center. Yeah. So small things like that, you can talk about bridge building and collaboration, but those kinds of intentional actions to share credit or to lift other people up in the process, I found is really, really important. And those are the skills that I learned, frankly, in student government that I still deploy today.
So now, fast forward to now, you're mayor. What are some of those skills that you practiced, maybe failed at as clerk of courts that are now proving to be really, really useful to you in another elected managerial role?
Well, I mean, look, I think when you're clerk of courts, there's not as many people coming to you asking for things. But when you're mayor, that changes overnight. And I learned a little bit about this in student government. By the way, I ran for student body president at Ohio State, so I've been a nerd for a very long time. Let me just put that out there. But what I've really honed since being mayor and leveraging the experiences I've had in the past is the ability to say no, and to take really hard positions on really, in some instances, unpopular issues. It's the mayor's job to. It's really the true essence of leadership. I'm the one person in our government, our local government, who's not worried about re-election in the next 2 or 4 years. I'm worried about where's the city going to be over the next 100 years, and what are the decisions that I'm making right now that are going to put us on a path to be successful in that time. And disappointing people is really just part of the job. But learning how to say no in a way that is not combative, in a way that's clear about why whatever the ask is inconsistent with our larger priorities, or deflecting the ask into a different ask that I can say yes to. Those are all kind of the nuances of leadership in City Hall.
So it's not easy to say no. It's especially for an elected official. So I can imagine that's a hard task. But I've got to believe there are a lot harder things. The scrutiny that one goes through when one runs for office, and the nasty vitriol that you hear from constituents and perhaps even your family hears. That's not fun. So with all of that, what if you were talking to the next president of USG at Ohio State, what would be your pitch to them as to why to continue down that pathway? Why is it worth the slings and arrows of public life to serve in a role like this?
There's no doubt that it's hard, right? But I love my job so much. I get up in the morning and my job description is to improve the lives of Cincinnatians. That's it. That's all I do all day long, every day that I'm in this office. And I can't imagine a job in the private sector that gives me that kind of platform and opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
In big and small ways, to just make people's life easier, to be their advocate. Just reflecting on it now, it is such a huge and awesome responsibility that I try to live up to every single day. And look, we all choose our professions for different reasons, but for me, again, it comes back to my family. I mean, it is crazy that my mom and dad in their early 20s decided to move across the world
Mm-hmm.
in a country where it was not their first language, where they didn't know anybody, where they didn't have anything, and build a life. The risk that took,
Yeah.
the courage that took. And so it's really incumbent upon me to live a life that is worthy of that sacrifice. And for me, public service is that opportunity.
Well, as a resident, not of your city, but of Ohio, I want to thank you, because I know, having served under Senator Glenn here, it's not an easy job. And so thank you for your willingness to take that on. Let's get in the weeds about your specific role. Your city is the birthplace of the city management form of government. And you just put a ballot initiative. And I probably should have said this at the beginning. We're recording this just after November's election. And so you had a ballot measure up. Tell us that was going to potentially make some changes to the system of government in Cincinnati. So give us a little bit of an education. What is the structure of the city of government governance in Cincinnati, and what change are you looking to make?
Yeah, we are really proud of our system of government here. We're really the leader in the city manager form of government, and it was a response, I don't know, 100 years ago to the boss system that was rampant in corruption here in Cincinnati, and we had that city manager led form of government for a long time. Just a quick primer on city manager forms of government. So in a city manager form of government, the mayor is more or less a figurehead, oftentimes elected from council. But the city manager, who's a professional, who's appointed by council, is the person who's in charge of all the employees and the budget. So really the CEO. In a strong mayor form of government, which is the other kind, the mayor is the city manager and the mayor. They have ultimate power in the executive. Obviously, council, sets the budgets, etc. But all city employees report to the mayor. The budget the mayor effectuates the budget. So for a very long time, Cincinnati had a city manager form of government. But our experience from lacking that kind of one political figure, that one leader, was that we were just kind of stuck in the mud. We didn't have one person really pushing us forward, setting the vision and executing against that vision. And so more recently, over the last, 10 or 15 years, we changed our city charter, our constitution. So we're really unique in the country in that we are not a city manager form of government, and we are not a strong mayor form of government. We are what's called a stronger mayor form of government. So we're a little bit of a hybrid. So I have, as mayor, much more authority. For example, I hire and fire the city manager. I dictate council's legislative agenda by having the power to put things on or off the calendar. I submit the first draft of the budget to council, and they kind of work off of that. And that form of government has really been successful in the short term, and really allowing us to still have a professional city staff, but also having the best of the strong mayor system, where we have one leader who's setting the vision and pushing us forward. But because we've been tinkering with our Constitution, there are unexpected consequences. One of which was a aspect of the drafting of our Constitution, which opened the door unintentionally for the mayor to pocket veto pieces of legislation. So since I decide what comes on the calendar or not, if I so pleased, I could just put a piece of legislation once it goes through committee into a drawer and not bring it up to the larger council until the very end of the term. This has not really been used recently, but it had been used in the past. And because we've had, sadly, some recent corruption in the hall, I thought it was an important change to the Constitution, and an important step to regaining some of that trust back with our community. It's not every day you see a mayor standing up and saying, "Take power away from me," but it is consistent with our namesake Cincinnatius, who is a legendary figure, a Roman general who had to fight back an overtaking of Rome, and after he was done, instead of continuing to lead, he gave power back to the people and went back home to be a farmer. So I don't know if that's legend or apocryphal, but that's who we're named after, and there's some interesting consistency there.
So you've obviously never read Machiavelli's The Prince. You're not there organizing behind the scenes to acquire power. You're getting rid of it.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So how has this system influenced your leadership style? Given what you've just described, then how do you approach your role as leader?
It's perfect. It's really set up well for me specifically. Look, we all have imposter syndrome. And when I was transitioning into being mayor, I was talking to one of my mentors, the most recent CEO of P&G, David Taylor. And I was saying to David, I feel all this pressure to be the smartest guy in the room, to have all the answers, to not look, like I wasn't on top of everything. And he gave me great advice. He was just like, it is unrealistic and impossible for you to set that bar for yourself. You're just going to disappoint yourself and those around you. In fact, it's more powerful for a leader to say, "I don't know," and to engage the team around him or her to get to the best answer. And that really is my leadership style. I think I'm a litigator still at heart. So I love it when the best possible argument from both sides kind of have it out, ask questions, and that usually leads me to the right decision. And so I'm really blessed to have an incredible team around me, to have really strong administrators on the city staff, and then obviously a council who's a true partner in achieving these goals.
So I'm glad you mentioned litigator as we sort of last chapter of this conversation. And I wish we could talk for a lot longer because there's a lot of things I want to ask you. But as I mentioned earlier, we're just coming to the end of an election. There are obviously some races and some things still up in the air. And by the time this airs, those will hopefully be resolved. But I think we know pretty much what the landscape looks like here in Ohio. And so obviously you are a Democrat, you ran as one, but I want you to go back to that litigator role of seeing both sides, and also your political science days as an undergrad, and sort of step back and give us your estimation for here in Ohio. When you look at a map, urban areas have gone blue and rural areas have gone red. And I guess another way to ask this is, what do you think explains why cities by and large throughout Ohio are run by elected Democrats?
It's a good question, because you wouldn't necessarily, when you think about our national politics, it's a bit unusual because so much of Ohio's economic power is because of the large employers in the cities. And so you would think that Republicans kind of stereotypically would be more aligned to that, or that, leaders in the state house would understand that. I think a lot of it has to do with culture wars and unfair attacks. I
Mhm.
think there is, cities are polyglots, right? They attract people from all over the world. They are densely populated, and they necessarily need to accommodate different faiths, different languages, different political persuasions. And so it really is, the best example of how diverse our country is. But with that comes some challenges. Obviously, crime is higher in densely populated areas like
Yeah.
cities. Taxes sometimes tend to be higher as a result of the need to provide public services on such a large scale. But I think, I think what you're seeing is a political divide that's only being exacerbated by, kind of toxic political messages that say either cities are unsafe, or, everyone outside of cities are racist, both untrue and unfair. And unfortunately, it has been very effective for politicians to divide and to make people scared. And I unfortunately, I think you're going to continue to see that. Now in Ohio, we have a unique situation. I mean, I genuinely believe, Dean, that the two forces that are polluting and in some instances really hurting our democracy is, number one, the just unfettered amount of money that gets poured into these races that has nothing to do with the district, right? All these outside independent groups just pouring millions and millions of dollars into these races. And then the second, unfortunately, it's true, is gerrymandering.
Yeah.
We were talking briefly. The House and Senate have historic Republican margins. I made the joke. I didn't realize it was possible for those margins to get even bigger for Republicans. But that is certainly not reflective of where the state is politically. And so we don't necessarily have truly representative or reflective government right now, which is, and when you have such gerrymandered districts, the middle, the kind of the compromise kinds of candidates get beaten by the extremes from both parties. And so it makes it really difficult to then govern.
So last question on that, building on some of the good themes you've identified, where are the opportunities for bridge building across the parties, and perhaps more importantly, and germane to your role, between the state house and urban areas, between cities and the state? Where do you think those opportunities for partnership are?
Look, I think traditionally it has been at the local level. And I say traditionally because we have seen more and more political attacks and opportunism around things like critical race theory. The pandemic really laid bare a lot of the politics on our school board races. But despite that recent trend, I still think these local political offices, whether they're county commissioner or school board or mayor or city council, gives us the best opportunity to have legitimate differences without the partisan toxicity. Part of the reason I love my job is because, yes, I'm a Democrat and yes, I'm elected, but my issues really are nonpartisan.
Yeah.
This is a real job, being mayor, right? Like, if I don't plow the streets and pick up the trash and fill the potholes, I'm going to be voted out, and rightly so. And there's no Republican or Democratic way to fill a pothole. You just got to get it done, right? So part of what I love about my job is people don't care about the spin or the obfuscation. They just want to see results from their local elected officials. And that really makes us as local electeds put all that crap aside as well. And so I think there's a huge opportunity to build back the strength of our democracy through these local offices. But I am somewhat worried that this trend of toxicity is being exported from DC and infecting lower and lower levels of elected officials.
Well, just based on this conversation, you're doing an artful job of acknowledging it, but not wading into it. So Thank you for a really engaged conversation. And again, as I said earlier, thank you for your role as an elected leader. We all benefit from value-driven, good-hearted people that, as you say, just doesn't matter whether they're Democrats, Republicans, they just want to deliver value to their citizens. So on behalf of the Glenn College and The Ohio State University, we are proud of the good work you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you, Dean, for having me back, and go Bucks, baby, go Bucks.